Coming to you from the last video store in the universe. It's Binge Movies, episode 174. I'm Jason. This is the show that ranks and eliminates movies to determine which ones are most worthy of preservation for all time, even beyond the end times. On this episode, we rank the top grossing movies of 2005, 5 through 1. I don't know that I've ever done a podcast before where there was greater than 70% chance that I was going to shit myself as I was recording. Before, after, yes. During, never. But I made an exception for you, David Powell.
I'm so flattered.
I'm flattered. You're wearing a Binge Movies shirt, a limited edition run shirt that we did a while ago. And that means, based on how we do it over at bingemovies.threadless.com, shipping to Oz was probably very expensive, and you wore it, and I am so flattered. And then here I am in your presence, shitting myself, or on the verge. You came with very supportive, and hey, got to support the show, and I'm like, I'm sick as a dog.
You're battling through, so I'm taking that as a very, very flattering.
Okay, all right. I can work with that.
You could have said, look, another day, the bathroom calls. But
here's the thing. It's all downstairs business. So there's not going to be any upstairs upchucking. So you don't have to worry about that. You're not going to see anything.
Look, anything could be happening. I mean, the way you work with chain backgrounds and things in all these platforms, you could be on the toilet right now.
I am
and just
right now.
Virtual background.
That's exactly right.
Like a newsreader in the summer wearing the Hawaiian board shorts under the table. Whatever happens out of camera stays out of camera.
Correct. And any squelching you may or may not hear is not diarrhea.
No, it's microphone squelching.
Yeah, it's just weird things that happen. Yes. Well, we're going to talk about 5 films that aren't Batman Begins. Are you disappointed?
I'm surprised. Very surprised that it didn't make the top 5 for the year. But the 5 that are there are all sort of behemoths in their own right. So
vast
in terms of revenue,
yes, correct,
not quality.
Okay,
I would stress that up front.
Okay, most of the people listening to this know who you are because you are one of the hosts of We Watch the Thing with B Dizzle. You've been there now for a year or so.
Yep.
You were super. What the hell did they call you over there? Super friend of the show over at the Countdown. Is that what they call you?
It was something like that.
Yeah. That's how before I ever saw you, I knew you because you would very frequently send chastising comments towards Paul on the Countdown. And he was like, super patron supporter, Riser Blades, David Powell. I was like, who is this David Powell guy? And there was a couple other shows. I don't even remember what they are now, because I unsubscribed, but they would mention David Powell. And then occasionally you would pop up on social media, never followed. You've since righted that wrong, but then you'd comment on what I was doing, and I was like, who the fuck is this guy? And then out of nowhere, B Dizzle's like, hey, finally got a new host. Fuck the last guy.
It's Alan Smithy.
And it's David Powell. I was like, David Powell. And then we did an episode together, the worst movies of 2023. Some moons ago now, and I thought, well, boy, I have to have Paul's personal thorn in his flesh on the show. B Dizzle's like best buddy now. You've become such good friends with him. He does not contact me anymore. It's great. Lost another one. So I had to do it. I had to. After interaction, I thought, who better to talk about these 5 films than somebody who out Negatron's Negatron, maybe? Not always, though. I've heard you
only when the situation calls for it.
Will we? I maintain. Will the situation call for it today?
I'm always factual.
I'm always factual. Will the situation call for it today?
Oh, I don't want to show my cards too early.
Okay, all right. case you're wondering what the top 5 highest grossing films of 2005 were, they are in this particular order. Coming to number 5 is King Kong. Number 4 is War of the Worlds. This is global box office. Number 3 is The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Number 3 is number 2 rather, is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And the top grossing worldwide film of 2005 was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Miriam Margolyes thinks you need to get over it. We'll find out if she's right. Right now, let's kick it off with King Kong, a movie I saw in fits and starts in 2005. And swore to myself I had never watched, but I am a whore for listens and downloads. And for the binge lords at home, I'll do anything for you. I am your Barbie girl, and this is a Barbie world. Let's look at King Kong.
Not according to the Oscars.
Yeah, not according to us. This is an Oppenheimer world, and I'm your Florence Pugh.
King Kong is an amazing adventure that has it all. Thrilling, says Newsweek. A surprisingly tender, even heartbreaking film.
It was beauty killed the beast.
Rated PG-13 in theaters December 14th.
King Kong was directed by Peter Jackson, written by Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, Peter Jackson. It is, of course, based on King Kong by Miriam C. Cooper and Edgar Wallace. It is a triumphant return of Andy Serkis, last seen sort of seen, but mostly heard in Return of the King. It was released December 5th, 2005 in New York, December 13th, 2005 in New Zealand, which, legend has it, is not Australia, and December 14th, 2005 in the United States. On a budget of $207 million, used to be one of the most expensive movies ever made, but now every Marvel movie is $207 million. The TV shows are just $207 million. Yeah. So there's no real trophy there anymore. This film made, if my notes will cooperate, what are we doing here, notes? $556.9 million. A vaudeville-loving giant ape gets his big break in the pictures when a flim-flam film man drags cast and crew to Skull Island.
Peter Jackson returns King Kong to the Depression era where it belongs and throws everything he's got at the screen and then some.
If you took every bit and piece I've seen throughout the years, I've maybe seen less than a third of it. So I really hadn't seen very much of it. Within the first 16 minutes, my thoughts were Jack Black is miscast. It should have been like Philip Seymour Hoffman. And
I could see that.
Or someone of that ilk. He just is not he's not right for this particular role. He's right for other roles. I've liked him in other things. I don't think he's right here. I think the movie, all of the Depression era green screen nonsense is very garish to look at. I think it's a very ugly movie. I think it has too many characters. I think it has too few good performances. When we finally get on the ship and all that first hour on that ship and getting to know all the crewmates, I understand the purpose of it, and it's doing the very thing I usually want movies to do, which is introduce your characters, even your background players, give me a little bit of character development so I care when they die. Yep. And he does that. He does that in spades. It does not work here for me. I think the Jimmy and Mr. Hayes relationship is terrible. I think Jimmy is to King Kong as to what Spider is to Avatar: Way of Water. I think the Jimmy character is embarrassing. I think it is some of the most cringe-inducing stuff I've seen on a big screen. It's so
poor old Jamie Bell.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jamie Bell. It sucks. Once we get into the set pieces, actual set pieces, I think that is where the movie and its director shine.
Yep.
The arrival at Skull Island with the fog, some of the fog being not fog, but being rocks, and the slow reveal of that, and the ship, and just that 15 minutes set piece of just them trying to get to the island. I think that's A+ stuff. I thought that was exceptionally well. I think Jackson is showing his kind of horror roots there. Same thing when we get into with the introduction to the natives, although I could have done without the step printing, which is that shutter effect that was very popular. He did it even in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's kind of one of the only things that dates that movie or those movies is that it's a very early 2000s kind of a thing. Everybody kind of dipped their pen in that. Spielberg did it. Everybody did it. I think the set piece of the early stuff with Kong and Kong fighting the T-Rexes and the Dino Stampede, which is a trip to a valley of multiple kinds, one of them being uncanny. There's a Chewbacca sound in there for some reason. I think the bugs, some of the bugs in that during that sequence on Skull Island is, even though there's digital, which I don't normally have that effect with a CGI bug, but when she's in that hollowed out tree log and the centipede is all around her and it's really creepy, and that's just a foreshadowing of what the guys are going through when they're at the bottom of that valley.
Yeah. And just when you thought you had enough bugs.
Yeah, just when you thought you had enough bugs, it suddenly becomes Deep Rising with the worms that are like suctioning and they...
Oh, poor Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis, and that's like true horror stuff.
Yeah.
And I was so locked into all of that. And then we go back to New York, and it's more or less, and I would even say like the capturing of Kong is really heartbreaking. It's really tragic, heartbreaking, really gets me to feel for this digital creature, this monster, so to speak. And then it just becomes a retread of an all-time classic film from the Depression era. This just like seems even more stretched out. And so really, I think if you lopped most of the first act and all of the third act off of this movie, and you just had what happened if they didn't bring him back to New York? What happens if they're just this crew of people are just attempting to bring him back and everything goes to shit on Skull Island? I think that's a good movie. We've already seen what happens when he comes into the big city. You're not going to top that. That's one of the first great special effects pictures in Hollywood history. You're not going to top it. And it's much shorter than this. You know what I mean? So ultimately, this isn't a bad movie, but it left me feeling as if I wish Steven Spielberg would have directed this. If you're going to do a sincere, old-timey King Kong kind of adventure movie that is essentially a remake or a reimagining or an embellishing, an unabridged version of the original film and story, I think Spielberg should have done this movie. I think Peter Jackson should have done Crystal Skull.
Anyone else should have done Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
But you would have had to extricate George Lucas to get rid of the problems with that film. Changing the director wouldn't necessarily have fixed any of the issues.
But some of the
if Spielberg had done Kong, though, you would have had 3 young kids on board the boat for no reason, so that you had some family drama.
I'd rather have 3 young kids than Jamie Bell as Jimmy. It's like we had Jimmy's whole backstory of how he washed ashore and didn't know who he was, all this sort of stuff, and it adds up to a bunch of nothing for me. The reason why I say Spielberg directed this is because I know he was much more a fan of like The Lost World than King Kong per se, although he did like King Kong. Is that he always wanted to make his monsters fighting in a valley movie, and he ended up turning Jurassic Park 2 basically into that, hence why it's also called The Lost World. I think that in a weird way, because he's so old, I think he would have been much more in touch with that material. But then the playfulness of some of the action sequences here and some of the jauntiness that's missing from the later Indiana Jones movies is actually oddly here. And I think the one thing that Peter Jackson has is he still has that really quirky sense of humor. And
even to the point of having a little nod to Brain Dead,
yes,
or Dead Alive with the Sumatran rat monkey cage on the ship, which I thought
there's that boyish humor
from ear to ear.
Yeah, that's still in there. That cheekiness that's still in there that Spielberg used to have in spades. A little bit different because Peter Jackson's got kind of a darker sense of humor.
Yeah,
but he still's got this sort of boyish jauntiness to his direction, and that's something that Spielberg lost by this point in his career.
Yeah, sure.
And basically lost somewhere in the mid 90s. Probably right around the time of Schindler's List, and understandably so, and went on to want to make different types of films. I mean, that's neither here nor there. Peter Jackson did direct this movie. I will say, unlike most $200 million movies and TV shows we get today, I actually can see where most of the money went.
Oh yeah, and I've got to. I mean, I agree. This film is too long. I think we spend a little bit too much time with the establishment and the before we kind of at least get to the latter half of the ship journey at the very least. I think he spends a little too long on that, but I'd kind of rather too long than not enough. So
yeah, it's I hear you. Yeah.
But I can feel his love for because the original is Peter Jackson's favorite film of all time.
Yep.
This was his passion project, even more than Lord of the Rings for his entire life. You can feel his love for the original in how faithful he is to following that story arc. I really like the way he's taken that original and where he can without disrespectfully changing it, he's made the improvements so all of these characters, given the runtime, it seems obvious, but all of these characters have more depth to them. Fay Ray's character is a one-note damsel in distress archetype, but as Naomi Watts as Andaro is the heart and soul of the film. So I think those improvements, I think, are all very successful, and I think the film looks, by and large, pretty amazing. And as you say, particularly once you're on Skull Island, and it's just for what is, given the runtime, probably about 90 minutes worth of the screen is just running and gunning through various scary monster set pieces. I didn't feel a second of that portion of the film.
No, not at all.
Give me 3 days of that stuff. The bugs, everything I thought was just fantastic. I didn't feel the runtime as much as you obviously did, and I'm surprised I didn't, given how long it is. Probably because I guess I was so invested in not just Andaro and Kong, which I think that was depicted really nicely. At no point did it feel kind of corny or anything, even though she's kind of making goo-goo eyes at a 20-foot ape. I think the circus mocap and Naomi Watts' performance really sold that the whole way through. But also the improvements made to Jack, the character of Jack, who's not this kind of dashing adventurer that we had in the 30s. It takes Adrian Brody starts out as kind of a nerdy bookworm.
He starts off as Peter Jackson.
And is essentially. And he's kind of forced into the role of action hero to try and save her. And I think that made it a lot easier to invest in his character. For the first half, I was thinking Jack Black is an odd choice. This, he's better where he can lean into his strengths in things like Jumanji, where the Jack Blackness can kind of be ratcheted up, or High Fidelity. But by the time we get to Skull Island, well, not just get to Skull Island, but get to the where they lose Anne and things all start to go a bit pear-shaped. I found so restrained in his quote-unquote Jack Blackness that I actually really liked him, because in addition to his kind of zaniness, he's very good at bringing the smarm. And he had the smarminess of this kind of snake oil salesman film producer. But I think he did a good job of kind of diminishing that the more things started to go sideways. And, he's still trying to film stuff even when they're running from monsters, and he kind of loses his camera, but then he starts to see more opportunity. Oh, maybe we can get this thing back to New York. I'll make a few bucks off that. I thought he sold that quite well. So in the end, I kind of, with the exception of the one thing where I think we could have lost something from the original is Jack Black's final line.
Yes.
Which I don't think Lord Olivier couldn't have sold that line. Beauty killed the Beast doesn't work.
Well, it doesn't work in this version of the story.
But even if she'd been the one to sort of whip out a gun and shoot him and literally kill him, you can't sell that line. No one talks like that, even in the 30s. So I think he should have lost that.
I mean, the line doesn't bother me from the original. It doesn't bother me in the movie. It is like too fine of a point. It is too poetic. But in this particular version of the movie, that's not his character, and that's not the story that we're telling. It's not. It's clearly not love that killed King Kong in this version of the story. It's clearly
Gravity.
the men with giant bottles of chloroform who smashed chloroform into his fucking eyeballs and shot him in the knee with a harpoon whaling gun.
It's not like Kong swam the Atlantic to get to New York chasing her.
Yeah.
He would. If the men with the guns and the chloroform hadn't been there, he'd still be on Skull Island pining after her.
Right.
So it doesn't work. And for me, it was even though it's a tiny thing, it was kind of the closer of the film, so it stuck with me more than it should have done. But overall, I'm surprised I don't remember this more fondly because I haven't seen it since it came out until this week. And to be honest, I'd almost forgotten it existed. Because in the Peter Jackson kind of pantheon, you've got 3 giant, awesome Lord of the Rings movies. You've got 9 hours of Hobbit padding.
Yeah.
And then you've got this kind of hidden in the middle, and I think it does kind of get forgotten.
Yeah, it's not,
which is sad because I think it's better than the Hobbit films.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yes, yeah, but I think that's exactly why we don't remember it. You have these they're not perfect movies, but you have these 3 largely successful films that drew millions of casual or non-pre-existing Lord of the Rings and or fantasy fans into a fandom of a story on top of the millions of people who are already fans of that story. And what a triumph that is. And we just completed that trilogy not too long ago, and all of those movies hold up remarkably well, other than some special effects here and there, and that's just time passing. And then he comes back to that world a little later from 2005, and does the Hobbit movies and pleases no one with those, not even himself. You know what I mean? And so you have this colossal success, and I don't want to call them failures, but they basically are failures. They're sort of debacles in a way, especially with the high frame rate and all that. And then
the whole production of those things is just almost legend. Del Toro pulling out, Jackson kind of having to do it even though he didn't want to, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah.
And so then in the middle of all of that, we have this, and it's neither a colossal failure, nor is it, to me, in my mind, a colossal success. It's a fine film, which is why I give it a 7 out of 10. I just wish it was most of the Skull Island stuff. I wish it wasn't a retread of King Kong.
I think if he hadn't been such an ardent lover of the original, he possibly wouldn't have held to it so slavishly, and possibly and I am a fan of. Did I see it at the cinemas? I don't think I did. John Gilliman's mid-70s version with Jessica Lange.
Oh, yeah,
and, Rene Aubergenois and Charles Grodin's in there, Kurt Russell, I think. I loved that as a kid. It was one of the first VHS films I ever saw, probably at the age of about 8 or something. But it took the other tack, obviously, and modernized it. He doesn't go up, he goes up from memory the Twin Towers.
In the 70s when he goes to the Twin Towers.
Yeah, because it's brought forward in time. It's not set Depression era. But it's a great film, and I loved that.
See, I don't mind the Depression era stuff. I don't even mind all of the stuff in the ship. Do I need 20 minutes before we even get on the boat to watch their vaudeville routine and then watch the...
Well, that's what I mean. Do we need to know
the old man
that much Ann Darrow stuff? Yeah. Do we just need her... start with her at a casting call with Jack Black.
Start with her stealing.
You've got the part.
Start with her stealing start with Jack Black, and he's, I gotta find this woman. I'm gonna make this movie. I'm gonna make a picture. See, and we need a woman, and we need a size 2 or whatever she was, size 4 or whatever she was. And then he catches her stealing. He steps in. She's in a desperate situation. She gets, this is gonna be her big break, and then we're on the boat. And we're off to the races. Like, speed it the fuck along. We could have gotten all of that. There's especially, I don't know if it's the same in your part of the world, and so I have to be careful because this is a movie for international audiences. But there's been so much there, especially lead up to 2005. There's so much media about the Great Depression in America that, and I think he does such a great job visually in the opening of the film, conveying to us this is the place and time that we're at. We're seeing people sleeping in the streets and begging for food and going to soup kitchens. So we don't then need, after the first 3 minutes of visual storytelling, 15 minutes of you being like, well, there's no money in funny business anymore. Well, you're going to have to go to the whorehouse.
You do. You've got a whole section where she collars some producer guy in the street, chases him, drools over through the window of a restaurant looking at food so that we know, but don't forget, she's hard up.
Yeah.
And he sends her off to the strip club saying, oh, it's a different sort of place, but if you're pretty, you can make a few bucks. We don't need all of that.
Don't need all of
it. It's never sort of referenced again. It's not referred back to that she almost fell off the tracks. It's kind of
that old man.
It is unnecessary padding.
The old man where we have this heartfelt relationship where.
Oh yeah, poor old what's his name from Shawshank?
Yeah. Take me to dinner and blah blah blah. But the thing is like, it's take me to dinner. They establish the connection. It fades to black. It comes back. The theater's closed. He says, "I'm packing it in, Annie. Best of luck to you." Yeah. No reference to him again. Why was he there? Get rid of that.
All I can think is that this end result is actually cut down from a 3.5 hour movie.
That's what I was going to say. Like, this must
where
be,
we've got even more of
there must be
her and Brooks.
Yeah, there must be a 4-hour cut or 5-hour cut of this, and this is the trimmed down version. Like, maybe honestly, maybe you're onto something in the fact of, after the massive success of Lord of the Rings, and those movies certainly aren't short, even in their theatrical version, although they're shorter than this. Do you think that they just sort of just gave him carte blanche because he was on such a hot streak that they gave him almost too much freedom?
And particularly when this is your life's passion project, I think he would have said, I want to make it. Because he ended up putting something like 35 million of his own money into it
I remember
when he was going
that.
over budget, which, I mean, talk about refusing to cut corners.
That's a great point.
I just think it seems to me that Peter, Fran, and Philippa are incapable of writing a movie that is under 2.5, 3 hours long.
Then you need an editor to come in and go, well, we don't need this, and we don't need this.
And an editor of sufficient stature to be able to stand up to someone like Peter Jackson and go, I'm losing this. I know you love it, but it's got to go.
It's got to go because we've already established it. This is the 6th time we've established that she's hungry. So we've got it. Your audience gets it. We got to get on that boat. And then once we're on the boat, there's 20 minutes on that boat you could probably cut. And then you got this middle section. Maybe we could trim up the T-Rex fight a little bit. It's good, but you could probably trim it up just a little bit.
Let's lose the half hour of soup kitchen lines and throw in some more centipedes later down the track.
Yeah. And the last hour is basically just a remake, a slavish remake to the original. Maybe we could tighten that portion up because there's a little bit. I mean, it's brilliantly rendered, and I think it's all very. I can't fault the execution, but you could lose half of Kong going up and down and around the tower and fighting. Yeah, it's the most
dropping her and catching her and dropping her and catching her.
Yeah, that's some of the most seen stuff before this movie was made. King Kong on the Empire State Building. Again, at least in this country, is so iconographic that it's just zeitgeist now. You've never seen the movie, and when I was in diapers, I knew King Kong on the side of the building swiping biplanes. You know what I mean? I don't need it. I don't need it. A fully rendered vision of, and what if that was 40 minutes long? I don't need it to be, or whatever, 10, 15 minutes. We don't need all that. So I think that's honestly, I think that's my number one criticism. It isn't the length per se, because to your point, you cannot fault the execution because the look and everything is there. It is it's the redundancies in the movie.
Yep.
it's not just that it's long;
I do agree.
It's redundant. And that's the thing is like Lord of the Rings can be long, and some of those I watched the extended cuts of those movies, and they're not.
I did during COVID. I did the 4K extended all 6 films.
Oh my God!
Back to back. And that that's like 14 hours or something. It's an undertaking. But it did sell me actually on the Hobbit movies being better than I remember them being.
So you think the Hobbit movies are better in their extended cut?
Oh yeah, for sure. Which seems insane.
So here's the thing. Wow, Lord of the Rings is great. Let's have him come over here and make a King Kong movie. You can do whatever you want. Don't chop a thing out. Yeah. And then it's redundant. And then maybe he learns a lesson of, man, I probably should have chopped more shit out of that. So then he makes these other movies. He goes, I got to chop all this stuff out.
He still turns a book this big into 3 films.
That's true. but yeah, so I mean, maybe that's to your point though. Maybe that is his Achilles heel as a director.
And I think he's also
these projects get away from him one way or the other. He either cuts too much or it gets
in love
too
with
big.
them. And
yeah.
Not to the same extent, and I would never criticize him as much for it as another filmmaker will be talking about today. Just because you can do something with CG doesn't mean it has to be in there.
Yes.
Don't fill every single frame with more computer-generated things.
Well, it
doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, it was very noticeable in this movie because there was one scene where they're climbing up a wall face kind of in a valley, and you can tell that at the very least it was a real set, and there's real plants because there's the fern. You could just tell it was like, okay, those are real plants, and that's real water, and there's real. And again, it was probably a set. It probably wasn't them really in the jungle, but still, it was a very well done set. And they're climbing, and it's okay, fine. The sky's going to be CGI, I understand, and all this accentuating stuff. But then there's like digital rocks crumbling and falling down. You couldn't just get some small rocks and shove them down this wall face you built? Like that was like, and that's to your point, is like, oh well, we could do this.
Polystyrene ain't expensive.
Yeah, we could add this, and we could add this, and we could add this, and it's like, oh, man, I wish you would have thought of that ahead of time and just gone. If you're going to go that practical, just go even more practical. Don't after the. I think that's not just limited to him. That has become the way of doing things, which is like, we don't have to think it through so hard up front because we'll always get a chance on the back end to make it better.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit.
Yeah, fix it in post. Fix it
in post. And it's bullshit. Doesn't work that way. 7 out of 10, my number 2 for the week.
8 for me, number 1.
Jesus Christ. I mean, 2 to 1.
I am now seriously considering going and buying this on 4K just to watch it.
I thought for sure you were to come in guns blazing for that movie.
No, not for this one.
Oh no. Are you gonna? Okay, all right. Well, we got to move along. We'll see. This
is a top 5 of highs and lows.
Oh shit. All right. Well, we're about to figure out whether or not this is a high or a low. I can tell you from my personal history, it was a low in 2005. I'm talking about Steven Spielberg's War of the World, which is the 4th highest grossing film of the year worldwide. Currently has a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes.
They've been planning this for 1,000,000 years. These are only the first. They'll keep coming. But wherever they're from, they made a mistake.
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds was directed by Steven Spielberg. It was written by Josh Friedman and David Koepp. It is based on, of course, The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. It is the triumphant return of Dakota Fanning, last seen in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think. Yeah. This was released June 29th, 2005, on a budget of $132 million. It made $603.9 million at the worldwide box office. Aliens arrive on Earth with all the subtlety of a monster truck rally and Tom Cruise spends the whole movie running like a scared jackrabbit.
I'm going to have to rephrase because it's almost word for word.
If it's word for word, just say it. Yeah.
Aliens invade, Tom Cruise runs, and children abound.
Okay. I now after seeing not Meet the Fablemans. Now I'm got Peter Jackson in my brain.
That would have that movie, but with puppets.
Yeah. Meet the Fablemans. Yeah.
Spielberg and Peter Jackson have collaborated on Tintin. They should
get
together
together. Yeah, make a gore fest with puppets about Spielberg's childhood. The greatest show, Train Derailment, is inserted in this movie. That we see it on the screen. Which now that there's an obviousness to what that means to him and how that created his fascination with film and obviously here's another instance where here's somebody who was obsessed with the book and the idea of the Orson Welles radio play, another passion project, War of the Worlds for Steven Spielberg. I didn't like this movie at all. I didn't want to rewatch it. I watched it, and I think it's because I'm older now. I found an appreciation for it. It's not a perfect film, but there is an obviousness to Ray, aka Tom Cruise, as a bad dad early on that is really kind of egregious. It's so obvious he's such a bad dad. And yet at the same time, there's a lot more subtlety to him being a bad dad. There's the fact that he draws his youngest, most vulnerable child towards danger instead of pulling her away. There is his own fascination with the storm and the machines, leading him to completely forget about his parental duties and where his children even are. And what the movie is it gets onto this vibe that is in Spielberg's movies, basically from post Schindler's List moving forward. And he's never completely gotten off of this vibe. He's tried a couple times unsuccessfully, but this is, and honestly, it actually kind of predates Schindler's List because it's in Hook as well. This is a movie that's really about finding paternal instinct or the fear of paternalism. It's the fear of fatherhood. This is a fear of fatherhood or fatherhood inadequacy film. Ray does not have a paternal instinct, and he develops that. But he has an anxiety about fatherhood that I think is in Spielberg.
Even sort of surrogate relationships like Jurassic Park.
Yes, there you go. It's there too.
I don't like kids. Well, you're going to have to look after them through some peril in my film if you want to be here,
yes.
Stephen.
Yeah. And it takes on a little bit more of a kind of a universal Western motif because it's, can you keep your daughters innocent? There's subtlety in the mentally unhinged Tim Robbins performance of what's he trying to take her for? What are his intentions with this little girl? Oh, I had a little girl like you. There's a creep factor to it. Right. And so there is the fear that a father has of his daughter.
There's so many moments too.
Yeah.
Then they're trying to get the car. He's like, let me get my daughter from the car.
Yes.
I need to get her out of the car.
As mobs of mostly men are shattering windows and cutting themselves to shards to try to get at.
So many occasions where he's trying to cover her eyes
yes.
or pull her out so she can't see.
Yes.
It's repeated numerous times throughout this film.
And it's not
this same sort of moment.
Yeah, it's not just protecting her from sex, although I think that's in there. It's sex and violence. He's trying to protect her from the cruelty of the world.
The cruelty of the world.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But he also has this son, and he's trying to keep his daughter innocent. He's trying to keep his son from going to war. Right? And so it's the ultimate fear of a father of losing your son to a false notion of heroism. You're going to go off and fight a mindless war that's going to get you killed. And yet the son has this instinct of, well, to be a real man, I have to go fight in this war. I got to go get vengeance. I got to go. And obviously there's a lot of like post 9/11 phobia in this movie. And that's probably its most direct metaphor. And when I'm watching this, and I'm watching the hordes of people attacking that van, like you brought up, like zombies, and people just casually killing each other with guns. I think in 2005, I really wasn't ready to fully embrace what that scene is in 2024, I think it may be the most accurate depiction of America in Spielberg's filmography. The fear, the mindlessness, even the way that we're bouncing around and, oh, I heard this and I heard this, the spread of misinformation and disinformation and oh, I heard they weren't even infected. Oh, I heard they were wiped off the face of the earth. There's nothing there anymore. And how they were just sort of this fomenting of fear and phobia that leads to violence and leads to death and leads to destruction and leads to taking a bad situation and making it worse because you have this stampede mentality almost, this panic and this fuck you, I'm going to get mine. And I think that is maybe at the heart of humanity, but it's definitely at the heart of Americans. This is, I really think like this is what we really are as a people. This is what we really are as a country. We've seen it now too many times in this country that this is what we are. This is what we do. We do not care or love our neighbor. We don't care for our neighbor. We don't even care for our own fucking families when it really comes down to it. There's a paranoia there of, I will fight you. I will kill you. You will not take what's mine. I will take what's yours. I will survive. You will die. And it goes to the foundation of this country. It goes before there was even a country here. Is the mentality of which everything we have was built on. It's in each and every one of us. Even me as I critique it, it's in me because I was born here. So there's not a judgment. It's just stating a fact. And I also think it from an American perspective, then I'll kick it over to you, is that like in 2005, I think we were really brought into touch because of 9/11 with those worst American impulses for the first time. The complete myth of the sort of World War II American exceptionalism was ripped away from us. And we were really finally starting to see our worst instincts and paranoias brought out collectively. But we also thought we'd return to quote unquote normal, that this would recede and then the niceties would cover all this back up. And in the 23 plus years since 9/11, 20 years since War of the Worlds, the animalistic fear, terror, and violence has only grown in America. It never receded. It's out. The real America is out. And what a lot of other people saw about America from other countries, we now see in ourselves. There's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. It isn't just because somebody flew planes in the towers, as horrible as that was. That shit was already in us, and it's now out, and it now is running the country. And that's fucking terrifying. And this movie is fucking terrifying. It is unrelenting horror of falling planes, capsized ferries. The alien invaders are almost incidental to how fucking scary this movie is. And we now live in an era where the fear of sending our kids to school, the ruthless elimination of people's jobs, economic inequality. Your mom is spreading Russian propaganda on Facebook. 40% of Americans want to vote to end democracy. War is hell. Alien invasions are hell, but life in the 21st century is war. So it's the only thing that I don't like about it is I think he gives us a baby boomer ending, which is that American military exceptionalism ends up kind of saving the day. Not really, like nature comes in and that's fine. That's a twist on the original end of the story. But it's like, it's draped in American camouflage, the American flag. The good old boys from the 2nd Division come in with their fucking battle cannons and start knocking these aliens out of the, and it's like, it's the belief, like there's this overwhelming dread, this overwhelming threat that is both upon us and within us. And the idea that just military violence is going to be able to solve this, I think is very naive and it's a very generational way of looking at it. So, yeah. I think if I had been raised in the shadow of the Second World War, I would probably believe that shit too. But I wasn't.
It's very much a product of its time. And I don't think it's exclusive to America. I mean, I think worldwide scenes like the car being swamped and the mob mentality and people just behaving like a pack of animals, irrespective of the fact there's this young girl screaming in the back seat. I think that's just
people
are dumb, stupid animals, as Tommy Lee Jones said. A person is smart. People
smart.
are dumb, stupid animals.
Yeah.
And I think Spielberg does deliver that message really succinctly and really clearly throughout this whole film is individually you see people, well, the exception of Tim Robbins, who I think is just the most ridiculous character in 20 years of film.
I live here. I would have thought so too, but I've met this guy the last 5 years. That guy's storming the Capitol on January 6th. Honestly, Tim Robbins is probably in the Senate right now. You could put Marjorie Taylor Greene in that fucking basement.
But I think he does a good job of showing the small scale moments between not just Tom and his kids, but him and his neighbors and his friends. Yeah. And these are all nice people that you like. And then you see a horde of people behaving like rabid dogs. And even to the point where not only do the guy take the car and just begrudgingly let him get this poor crying child out of the back seat, but then you've got another guy just cold as day, just pick up a gun, walk up and shoot him through the window of the car.
Yeah.
So I think that's all really well delivered in this film. I think the film looks pretty spectacular.
I didn't think so in 2005, but god damn does this movie look good now.
Yeah. And some really nicely designed pieces. The river of bodies is one that's going to stick with me for years to come.
Yes.
It's one body, two bodies, and then the whole river is bodies. Just really, really, and the shots like very Hitchcockian, but the flock of birds landing and flying around this behemoth alien tripod, and that obviously as a foreshadowing that later on you see them actually land on. It's oh my god, the shields are down. Get it.
Yeah. Well, there's
all of that. I think is very, very good.
There's the reconfiguring of the Close Encounters when they're in the basement and the light coming through the basement window and then through the stone. It's very much like the light coming through the keyhole of the boy. There's the flashing when the plane is crashing and they don't realize it and they're in the basement. It's like a mashup of Close Encounters and Poltergeist at the same time. I know he didn't direct Poltergeist, but he does have his fingerprints over it. And so it just is like, it's, I agree. There's some really, you would think of this as being, I would have thought of this as being part of his lesser canon, and it still probably is, but it's much stronger than I ever remembered it being, which I don't know. I always battle with that of it. Is it I'm no longer able to keep up with newer film style, so anything that's kind of old appeals to me because now I'm in that zone of being kind of old. I'm not old, but I'm not young, so I'm kind of old. Or is it a degradation of filmmaking, that filmmaking has become such a degraded art form and almost going back to like when they just used to shoot stuff with rear projection in the 20s and obviously flim flam sets. You know what I mean? We're kind of gone back there. You know,
you've obviously seen Rebel Moon.
Yeah. We've kind of gone back to like the old studio Hollywood days where it's like very obviously not in the real world. And everybody's like, what an innovation. We've taken movies back 75 years. So I don't know what it is. Or if it's just a change of my taste or I don't know. It's my way of saying, I don't know that I'm right. And if I am right, I don't know why I'm right. But this is a much better movie than I remembered it being. It still has a lot of the shit that gets on my fucking nerves and will continue to get on my nerves. The son sucks. The actor.
Oh God, he's badly written.
He's badly written.
And Chatwin is not a great actor.
No.
I haven't liked him since J-Pod on Canadian TV back 30 years ago or something. I mean, he's permanently tarred with the brush of being in Shyamalan's Avatar. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
Oh no, it wasn't that. He wasn't that. He was Dragon Ball Z.
He's Dragon Ball Z. Yeah. I think that's right.
So his character is terribly written.
Horribly written.
The way he flips between I hate you, Dad, and then I love you. And the whole scene where he's just, I need to do this. I need to. Why? Why do you need
Here's
to?
the thing.
Your sister is being dragged off by well-meaning strangers. You can see it in your line of sight. And the two of you are fighting over the fact you need to go running towards the fire and disaster and explosions.
I 100%
he doesn't say,
agree with you.
I want to be a man. That would have been terrible as well. But he doesn't ever elucidate what he means. It's just, I need to do this. He comes across like he's deranged.
Yes. Yeah. Well, okay. So obviously what that was supposed to harken back to Cruz's behavior earlier in the movie. That
I'm not a boy. I need to be a man. I need
the father
to do
hates
this.
his son, but he's more like his father.
The writing is not good enough to convey that in the slightest.
No, he's a boy who hates he's a son who hates his father because he's just like his father. And even in trying to rebel from his father, he's actually just acting on his own father's instincts inside of him. I get all of that. But almost that scene in particular, I remember that sticking out to me in 2005, and it really soured me in the movie. And I was waiting for it to come along. I was like, "Is this as bad as I remember?" And it is.
The writing is and it's bizarre.
It feels like
the guys that wrote this are good writers.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That scene feels like it was. They got the outline of it. And they were like, we'll go back and we'll work on the dialogue and the subtext and
we're obviously, the finished film is not just going to have him saying, I need to see this, you need to let me go.
And then they got to shooting day and they're like.
That's placeholder, yeah, good, okay, yeah, there's placeholder.
Fuck, we never got past the outline here. That's what it feels like.
And poor old Dakota, who's 90% of she's one of the greatest young
I was going to say, she's incredible.
In 40 years. And all they give her to do is scream.
But
incessantly to the point where I was hoping she would get taken.
I still think she's incredible in this movie. And I think oddly enough.
The moments where she is given actual acting to do, she's fabulous. But she is given too many goddamn screams.
Yes.
Oh my God, it was just getting painful.
I thought somehow this little girl who was, I think, 10 or 11 at the time she did this movie is elevating this material. At 10.
Oh, yeah.
And you got this.
God help us if it had been someone that couldn't act as well as she does in this.
You got this 20. You got her brother who is a much more experienced human being and actor who is not elevating the material that he's being given.
No, he's not good at all.
He's not good at all.
Really
and the father-child relationship and father-son relationship, especially with the ending note of where it ends with them being reunited, is such a crux of the movie that I think what happens is between the U.S. military showing up and it becoming like a World War II movie all of a sudden, and then the Morgan Freeman voiceover, which he does a good job of, but that's become cliche, and it's just sort of like glossed over microbes got him. And then the reuniting of the father and the son, because the son is never a fully developed character and is not a good actor, even though that through line of the story, I think, is really good and an interesting angle to take in this movie.
It should have added to the film. I felt the family drama was kind of forced, and I think a lot of it, or all of it, is down to failings in the writing and in Justin Chatwin's performance.
That's what I'm getting at.
So what could have been something that added to this classic story, because I got to the end of the film and instead of thinking, Spielberg really put an own spin on it, he added an extra layer with this kind of intimate drama to contrast with the bigger picture. I just found myself going, why did he even bother? What was wrong with our narrator just chasing after his fiancée and her dad and trying to get to them? That would have been just as engaging. And the problem is not the concept of adding this father-son, father-daughter stuff.
Execution.
It's just execution.
So when
the other thing which irked me right from the very beginning, and this is on me, not on Spielberg, is Morgan Freeman's fantastic. Probably the best person you could have got to do this.
Yeah.
But I'm such a fan of Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. It was the wrong voice for me.
Really?
Yeah. I just, as soon as those words started to get spoken, I'm like, this isn't Richard Burton. It all feels wrong already. And then what's more, you get to the end of, across the immeasurable vastness of space, cast their eyes upon us, and slowly but surely they lay their plans. and then we didn't get a bum, bum, bum. I was just like, oh, God, I just want to go and put on the album now because I'm missing all the feels are wrong. But that's on me. That's just my personal addiction to that album.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this was a real movie of two halves for me. The visuals were phenomenal and better than I remembered, and all the stuff with the sun and everything was worse than I remembered. So it's like I genuinely don't know if I like this or not.
Well, I went into it genuinely not liking it, and then walking away with it thinking, okay, this is actually better than I remember. But the third act and the final scene to close out the movie is not successful because the sun character is not successful. So it leaves you feeling as if to me it left me feeling as if it was the movie. We did all of that, but it didn't stick the landing. So I give it an 8 out of 10. It's my best of the week.
Wow.
But it is a deeply flawed film. The third act especially, I think, is deeply flawed.
I'm a 5.5.
Oh my gosh.
It's my fourth.
Wow.
And it is. It's kind of half of it is amazing, but the bits that don't work for me didn't work so horrendously that I came out at the end of the film going, you know what? That's a bad film with some good scenes.
And I think it's a good film with some bad scenes. And I started off at your position thinking that movie sucks. I've been saying for, I don't know, however long 10 years I've been on Twitter, like, War of the Worlds, that one sucks. That one sucks. That one sucks. And I don't think
if you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said this was a good film, probably about a 7.5 out of 10. Because all I remembered was rivers of bodies and.
But that's the difference in time, right? We're the same people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And our opinions basically diametrically flipped without us knowing it about the movie, just because we're slightly different people than we were the last time we saw it, or maybe greatly different. Yeah. So that's why, going back to these movies, you get different things out of them. And apparently you got a whole host less this time around.
I got a renewed disdain for Justin Chatwin.
I got a renewed, yeah. The glow of Spielberg dimmed a little bit more in your eyes. All right, well, magic and child actors and doom and gloom and biblical allegories abound in the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which currently has a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes.
This Friday, Narnia arrives, and critics are hailing it as the most incredibly exciting blockbuster of 2005. Take them. It's truly spectacular, absolutely thrilling, and one of the year's best films. Hang on! 5 stars, a magnificent story destined to become a classic, and Ebert and Roper give it 2 thumbs up. Are you prepared for what awaits you? The Chronicles of Narnia, rated PG. See it Friday.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was directed by Andrew Adamson, who I don't know who the hell that is. I've never heard of that person. Maybe I've seen his movies. I don't know. I was so stunned.
The only other things I know he's directed are the first couple of Shrek films.
Oh.
Not a huge, and he did do another one of the Narnia films, but other than that, I don't think there's too much in there.
The screenplay by Ann Peacock, Andrew Adamson. This was interesting to me. Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. Marcus and McFeely, who would go on to write some of the best MCU movies.
Oh, wow.
Very strange here.
Do not know the names. I did not know that. That's interesting.
Based on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, of course. It's Triumph Return of Tilda Swinton. Last seen in Endgame. James McAvoy. Last seen in Days of Future Past. Jim Broadbent. Last seen in Deathly Hallows. Liam Neeson. Last seen in The Phantom Menace. Ray Winstone. Last seen in Crystal Skull. And Michael Madsen. Last seen in Reservoir Dogs. This film was released December 9th, 2005. The perfect Christmas movie. If you're having to program these things. On a budget of $180 million, it made $745 million worldwide. This isn't exactly true, but I couldn't think of another way to say it. 4 unlikable urchins enter a magical land in order to wage war on the talking animals who live there.
4 wartime refugees find a magical land through a bunch of coats and meet furry Jesus.
So far, we have a King Kong remake, right? Which is Depression era, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Old-timey shit. Long time passion project. Iconic IP is what we'd call it now, but iconic stuff. War of the Worlds, kind of the same thing. More Cold War era, but still kind of the same thing. This is kind of the same thing. What initiated this? Is this where all the studios are figuring out that we could get our own Lord of the Rings, our own Harry Potter, our own. There's old timey shit we could dust off and make a fortune with it. Why in 2005?
Did a whole bunch of stuff move into public domain that year?
It feels like it, right? It feels like okay. If anything was made between 1930 and 1955, by God, it's time to turn it into a $200 million movie. It's strange. It has to be Lord of the Rings, right?
War of the Worlds and the Narnia books would have, but I mean, I haven't looked it up, but they were all written.
The Narnia books came out like
20th century.
Yeah, Narnia books were 50s in the 50s.
Oh, that's more recent than I thought.
But the War of the Worlds movie that he would have seen, Spielberg would have seen, would have been probably in the 50s.
Yeah. George Powell or whoever it was. Yeah, for sure.
These are all of a kin, is what I'm getting at. Like these are all.
It's all stuff that, and I mean, I'm nowhere near Spielberg's age, but these are all things that I grew up reading, and or watching, and it would have been
they're classics.
The same for him, yeah. He would have read these books as a kid.
Yeah.
Spielberg would have read and or watched War of the Worlds as a kid. It must be producers in general are of an age and all started feeling nostalgic for their childhood.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And I think how they probably got it to investors or shareholders or whatever was, well, look at what Harry Potter's doing, right? Look at what Lord of the Rings is doing.
I think there's the Lord of the Rings, I think, was probably one of the big ones because it was such a massive leap forward in terms of showing what you could do with special effects and CGI, because Weta did everything for a quarter the price of what American houses were doing. So you could make this 3-hour movie that looked better than anything that came before it for a quarter the budget, and suddenly producers were going, if we farm this stuff out to some of these overseas places, we can bring these
epic
childhood
stories,
classics that millions and millions of people will go and see, and we can make them look amazing. And so you get this, you get Golden Compass, you get all of these things suddenly being made.
We can take these iconic things that already have global recognition, but maybe the scale was too costly using American special effects, like you said.
Or even 10 years prior, technology just didn't exist to be able to bring all these magical creatures.
Right.
It would have all been practical.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but you can't do the big grandiose stuff practically. That needs to be CG.
Yeah, you're right. And we have the built-in opportunity for sequels because we've got multiple books, or we've got this, or we've got that. Yes. Yep. So, that's what I guess what I'm getting at here with this is, so I haven't read the books. I'm obviously very, very familiar with them because they're huge, right? The Chronicles of Narnia is freaking huge. It's not like the Space Trilogy or whatever, which is for the real hardcore Lewis fans. These are his biggest books of all time, arguably. And these are beloved, and multiple generations of children around the world grew up with them and reading them or having them read to them. And very much like Harry Potter, the stories kind of grow up with the characters, and so the books can kind of grow up with the audience. And Narnia is so ubiquitous and iconic as a fantasy land that it is now synonymous. If you say, "Oh, he's off in Narnia," everybody knows what you're talking about, right? It is one of the most iconic fantasy worlds of all time. And obviously there's also the connection between Lewis and oh my gosh, not J.K. Rowling, Tolkien. So, they were friends, and some of this stuff was written around the same time and inspired by each other and all this other sort of stuff. So there's synergy here. Because of that, I think that this movie spends a lot of its time trying to get us as the audience to feel the magic and the wonder of Narnia. And I understand that impulse, right? We got to get you to believe in this world, and we're bringing it. Everybody's dreamed of being a child in Narnia, and here it is. We made it. And I understand that impulse, but I think that this movie, either because it is a slightly lower budgeted film, which is crazy because it's $180 million, it fails. Narnia does not, as a world, feel magical in this movie. And I think they've sacrificed the characters of Peter, Edmund, Lucy, and Susan for the sake of world building. But the story of this movie, which is a very faithful adaptation, at least in my book, of what I know of the book, is a largely personal one. It's a largely, it's big and it's epic and it's grandiose, but it's ultimately about these kids and the older kids beginning to lose their ability because of the Second World War and tragedy to imagine, and they end up losing their ability to travel to Narnia. By the next book, they can't find it anymore and they can't see it anymore. And so it's about the loss of innocence. And obviously, there is
very much so. Yeah. You get to a point in the books where Peter and Susan can't go anymore because they're too old. Yeah. It's not that they forget about Narnia or anything.
They just can't get there.
They can't get there. And it is, obviously very much about that loss of innocence, the loss of, childlike wonder, etc.
And the analogous nature of childlike innocence and faith. That there's
the Christian allegories, and I loved these books as a younger kid.
Yeah,
they were probably maybe it's hard to cast my mind back that far because I'm so goddamn old. But I think this is probably one of my introductions to fantasy in general. Was reading these books, and I adored them. I've still got the old brown paperbacks, which I've passed down to my kids who don't read them because the kids are more cynical now, and all of the really bludgeon you over the head Christian allegory, which I missed as a small child, is so patently obvious to kids these days. It kind of the magic of these stories, I don't think kids now necessarily feel the way kids like me in the 70s would have felt.
Yeah.
Because to an extent, pre-internet, pre all that, we were a lot more innocent in terms of our perception of the world,
and also
what the goings on of the world,
and pre-internet, all that. A lot more of your, because you're a little bit older than me, play was imaginary. It was imagination based.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you're already as a kid generating these worlds in your own mind.
Yeah, where my kids have got iPads.
Correct.
And things, I had a stick and two pebbles.
Correct, right? So then when you bring a book that sort of taps into what at that point was the natural instinct of a child and play, we now live in a world where content imagines for kids. It has taken the place of the imagination. So to be like, here's a fantasy land. Well, I mean, they've got 70 billion fantasy lands a click away. Yeah. So I think some of the luster's off the story for sure. But I think where this movie falters is Lewis had this whole idea about the true myth, right? That everything is myth. All of our fables, all of our stories, the magic, the deep magic, it's all interconnected. And just because something is a myth doesn't mean it's not true. That myth can convey truth, and that there is a truth.
There's an idea about Narnia sort of being almost Garden of Eden-ish. This place where all of that stuff comes from, and then by the time it filters through to our world, it's myth, it's story, it's fable, it's all these things. But it all originates from
some kind of
Narnia.
reality, something is maybe even more real than our reality. Yeah, you're spot on. And he of course would like place Christianity. He called that the true myth, and that would be like the core of what makes Narnia true and all this other sort of stuff. So, and we don't have to get into all of that, but the point is he locates that in these kids in the story that he's writing, and eventually, you know, Prince Caspian and all these other figures that come along. And this movie kind of sacrifices all of that to be like, look at this world of wonder. But the world of wonder for Lewis is located in the eyes and hearts of these children. I don't feel like I ever see Narnia, even from Lucy's perspective. She's the most innocent one, and for the movie to be successful, I got to feel what she feels when she sees James McAvoy as the fawn. I have to feel what it's like to be on a talking horse named Philip, and the boy and his horse, and all this sort of stuff. I need to feel what it's like to chase the white stag, and all of these iconic moments. They're all here. I don't feel any of them because there's no entree into the perspective of the children. The children are almost incidental to Narnia itself.
There's an element, and I think I'm perennially being down on child actors because most of them are terrible.
Yeah.
The standouts, as we've mentioned, you've got your Dakota Fannings, you've got your Haley Steinfelds. There are outstanding child actors. Most of them are terrible, and in most cases, they bring a film down where they have where they're positioned at the forefront, and the film sort of hangs on whether or not you engage with them. I think these four are fine.
That's it. They're fine.
I think, you know, they get the job done. None of them are demonstrably bad. I don't think they bring the film down, but I don't think, to your point, that they elevate it enough. It feels terrible to pick on the youngest of them, but she is our main protagonist, really, for the film.
Yes,
and as the viewer, our viewpoint. And I think she does fine, but I think if you had one of these outstanding child actresses in the role, it would have been that much better. It is. I find it very hard to view this particular film dispassionately because it's kind of like I felt watching Fellowship of the Ring, seeing something that I'd loved reading as a very young child brought to life. And I'm sure it's how younger kids felt when they first saw the first Harry Potter film, seeing, you know, a big budget, certainly for the time, you know, all this stuff come to life on screen, you know, Aslan. Oh my God! In real,
but here's the thing. I think Aslan works.
I have an innate affection for this film that probably is not quite warranted. I think the film is good, but I think I like it a little bit more than it probably deserves because I have a built-in affection for it for that reason as well.
You're like the target audience, right? You are one of the
100%.
Yeah. In essence, like this is a movie. This is a movie that is a fairly, I think you could correct me if I'm wrong, but fairly faithful adaptation.
It's many years since I've read it, but I would say it's extremely faithful. I can't think of anything that's been left out, and I can't think of anything in the film that I immediately went, oh, that's been shoehorned in. That shouldn't be there. That's an addition. It's pretty faithful, and I think
it's not cynical either. This doesn't feel like a cash grab movie. It feels like we're really telling the story with love.
And the Narnia stories, it would be very easy to get cynical or to be kind of overly schmaltzy because the Christian allegory is so strong, and you are looking through the eyes of very young protagonists. And it is a children's book. This is not like a Lord of the Rings, which is you know, written to almost be adult fiction, but the subject matter made it something that kids gravitated towards. These are children's books, not even YA fiction. This is children's book, and tonally, that's where they sit. You've got no one dies. People get turned to stone, but they get brought back. That's okay.
I think some of the bad guys might die,
but that's all right.
But then
they don't die in the fountains of blood or anything.
She kind of heals some of them though at the end too.
And and that's the you've got the magical MacGuffin get out of jail card of the magic elixir, so she can undo
given to her by
stuff.
Father Christmas, by Santa Claus himself.
Yes.
Yeah. But
exactly.
here's the thing. Like I worried that because this movie is, to your point, so so innocent in its perspective. I worry that it would really be cloying or get on my nerves. And maybe because the world is that much more a cynical place, or I'm that much more of a cynical person. It didn't bother me at all. I have found it actually very refreshing that it just is what it is. No.
It's a very nice film.
Yes, these beavers talk and they're funny.
It's pleasant. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's I'd forgotten as well because it had been many years since I'd seen this. I'd forgotten what a stacked cast it is. I remembered McAvoy and Tilda Swinton.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of faces in the background.
And a lot of voices for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was even when you rattled off the cast list, I was going, Broadbent? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's here's what I think. I kind of ragged on the movie a little bit, but I think when the beavers are introduced, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, and we start getting into more of the heart of the matter, and no pun intended, and then we get to Aslan, and he's such an interesting boy. You could do a whole thing on this. We don't have time. Yes, the Jesus allegory is, very, very, very strong, but it's a very interesting take on Jesus. Because he's not a one-dimensional, and that's the most famous thing. Like, he's a good lion, but he's not a tame lion.
Yeah.
He's good, but he's not tame. And he's good, but he's not safe. I think that's really interesting that this is Lewis's idea of who Jesus is, right? Because we have this sort of...
Oh, he's leading people into battle.
Yeah, but we have this
is Jesus transposed to the Old Testament.
Kind of, but we have this like felt board Jesus, right? This very one-dimensional thought a lot of times in media, Christian and otherwise, that Jesus just becomes this sort of one-dimensional moralizer or hippy-dippy guy or fire and brimstone guy or whatever. Jesus sort of becomes a one-dimensional figure to serve the agenda of whatever it is that the movie, whether the movie is trying to mock the idea of Jesus or whether it's Christian propaganda or anti-Christian propaganda. It tends to be propaganda. And this doesn't feel like propaganda. This was like, this has come out of the mind of somebody, and of course it's C.S. Lewis, so this is actually the case, of a very deep thinker and a deep feeler. And he's not just made Aslan a one-for-one of like, it's Jesus in lion form. It is, but he isn't. And even the parts of him that are Jesus, it's like he's unpredictable. He sort of comes and goes out of your life.
Weirdly, for someone who was deeply religious, not in this particular book, but once you get through to the last book, the Last Battle, I think it's called, it's a lot, from my recollection, a lot stronger allegory along the lines of Aslan being the archetype for not just Jesus, but for everyone's version, every religion's version.
Messianic
because
figures.
He has some line like in your world I'm known by many names or something like that.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that there are more layers to Aslan than the way Christianity presents in most cases.
Yeah.
Jesus or other religions do their respective versions.
Or that media predicts Jesus too. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, there's this notion in here. And I think this is really heavy for kids. Lucy is there and Aslan does the Irish goodbye. He takes off and doesn't say anything, right? And it's so interesting because they're like, he's the true king of Narnia. And yet his entire mission is to get these kids on the throne. He doesn't really care about being on the throne. And I think that's really interesting that somehow his reign over this world bypasses political power. And he's almost not even interested in it. He's almost not. He is not interested in it.
Oh, and in Narnia, they go generations without seeing him.
That's the other thing, right? And so
he's like a proper deity. He's most of the time he's not even present.
Well, okay, like that's a joke, but I think that's a really interesting. There's this idea in theology, which is the transcendence and the eminence of a deity, or the revealed and hidden nature of a deity. And the idea, of course, is that even if your God is a living God, that you have some kind of communion with, like you would a Jesus, that Jesus does not always make himself evident even to his own disciples, that he hides and obscures himself. And there's a distance that you feel. And then there's this closeness, this visitation, where there's times in your life or in human history where it feels like that deity is even closer to you. And he's worked even that into this children's story of sometimes God is going to come in and fight the battle for you and lead you to victory. And then sometimes it's going to be as if he doesn't exist at all.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, if humankind can understand the entirety of a deity, it's not a deity.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes. Yes.
Most of a deity should be incomprehensible and invisible to mere transient mortal creatures like us.
But that's what I think, because it's a faithful translation, adaptation of C.S. Lewis's work, and he is being maybe sometimes clobbering, but maybe also sometimes he's conveying subtleties of faith that are way beyond the pale for most adults to reckon with, that he's already giving these truths to children because he thinks that children are more capable of understanding them, even if it's just intuitively. And,
I think that's really well put.
And that's the sense that you get through this movie, right? The movie somehow kind of captures that. And yes, he's a CGI lion, and it might be a little bit of an too obvious of a choice, but when they kill him on that stone, that fucks me up.
Yeah. Oh, that was a traumatic moment in the book for young kids.
Oh my gosh!
Pause in your reading. They did what?
Yes. And even though I obviously know the resurrection is coming, boy, that death, that sacrifice is still very impactful. Even though it's a CGI lion with Liam Neeson's voice, it fucks me up, man. And
prefaced with the degradation of having the mane chopped off and
punched in the face.
Analogous to the crown of thorns and the whipping and
yes, the mocking and the jeering and when the little goblin like just slaps him in the face is like true king of Narnia or whatever he says to him. I mean, that's straight out of the Gospels when Jesus is hit in the face, sucker punch, and they say, tell us, prophet, did you see that coming? Right? Like, if you're so great a prophet, how did you know I wasn't going to beat the shit out of you? And like, even you read that in that story, it does a great job of capturing the sense of that there's an injustice going on here. That this is not just a hero dying. That this is an innocent being sacrificed. This is atonement.
And the whole time being watched on by young children.
Yes. And he's dying for them, essentially. Yes, it's specific to Edmund, but it's really for them. It's for Narnia. He's selflessly sacrificed himself. And that could be so saccharine and preachy, and it really isn't. It's very well done. And I start to get moved just by when they are sneaking and following him, and he realizes that they're following him. And it's sort of like his Gethsemane. It's sort of the Garden of Gethsemane moment.
Not only lets them go with him, but
needs them.
And she said, "Oh, can I put my arms around you or something?" He said, "Oh, yeah, I think I would like that very much."
Oh,
because he knows he's going. He knows what he's going off to do. And he's like, oh, "Okay, I'm about to die. Yeah, give us a cuddle."
Yeah, yeah. Like he needs that comfort, and then you think about it with the Garden of Gethsemane and the story of Jesus, and Jesus actually doesn't find that comfort because in the story his disciples fall asleep, and he says, "Couldn't you have stayed awake with me even for an hour in my time of need?" And yet these little girls, and then of course there's the first witnesses of the resurrection are two women in the gospel stories. And so the witnesses of the resurrection and this is where you get into the allegory, all of the disciples scatter, I think except for John, and depending on which gospel you read. But the women are the ones who in every gospel tradition stay at the cross. They stay at the crucifixion. and they tend to his body, and they care for him, and they prepare him for the burial, and they find the tomb, the borrowed tomb to put him in, and they go to there on the third day, and then, he's not here, he's risen. And so that's where it gets obvious in the Jesusness of it. But at the same time, it's like these two little girls are the comforters, and they're the most faithful of all of Narnia. These two innocents, these two little girls, even though Susan's a bitch. So
the men folk are I mean, Peter's sort of, and to an element is the reminiscent of male pride. And
yes,
he's prideful. He's a bit braggadocious.
Yeah.
He's and then you've got Edmund, who is greed and he's
Judas.
Yeah,
yeah,
and
Peter is Peter, right? I'm gonna whip the sword out and cut the ear off, and Edmund is obviously the Judas figure, obviously reconfigured, but still, yeah, and so that if you know enough of a different story, you can transpose it onto this one and go, oh yeah, I see it. But I thought the movie executed it as well as it could. I'm surprised that the sequels didn't do better. It's odd to me because to me, the ones being around these stories, the Prince Caspian, a boy and his horse,
Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and Last Battle.
Yeah, but this one
and Magician's Nephew.
Yes,
which is the one they're about to make next year, I think.
This is the one. This and Prince Caspian were the ones I heard people talk about all the time. The other ones I heard here and there, I didn't hear very much about the Last Battle very much. So in my memory, those weren't as popular. Like this was the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was like the most popular, and probably Prince Caspian.
I think that's the nature of these franchises, because Magician's Nephew which is technically book one.
It's like a prequel,
from memory. It's a prequel, and it was written later. So the first book that was released was Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and it was obviously boom. That's set
big
the world on fire. First sequel, Prince Caspian. A bit of the audience drops off, but most people are still there.
Yeah.
And then you get Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Horse and His Boy,
Boy. That's it. Yes,
it's got zero connection to anything else. It's set in a different land at a different time.
Is it really?
I don't even think fucking Aslan's in it. It's more of an Arabian Nights type story.
That's weird.
It's good, but it's very much out. And then you've got Last Battle, which came sort of back to the whole Narnia thing. But you've had a few years in between, so a lot of the kids that loved it around Prince Caspian probably dropped off with this weird Arabian Nights tale that doesn't have any connection.
That fills in that blank for me.
A few years later, we get Last Battle. Half of them are teenagers now and not reading.
Don't care.
You've got this, two books, as you say, that are much better known and probably people have a lot more affection for, and they also have a connection in terms of the characters, because with the Last Battle you get everyone back, but Voyage of the Dawn Treader is different character. I mean, you've got Caspian as an old man from memory, but the kids are all different. So Susan and Peter aren't there for Prince Caspian, and Edmund and Lucy are now the nice, Edmund's now one of the nice kids because he's gone through his baptism of fire and come around to being on the side of good. And you've now got a new annoying kid called Eustace. And Eustace is a little shit and you hate him. But then by the time you get to Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Eustace you like, and there's a new girl, Jill Poole or something.
There's always a bratty ass kid.
So it's Narnia makes kids better. But so by the time you got to Voyage of the Dawn Treader, there's no characters in common with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So again, it's hard to sort of keep the investment all the way through, I think.
Yeah, that now makes sense to me. That makes sense of why I'm only hearing a couple of these and why didn't these movies do better? And because if that's the case, it'd be kind of hard to adapt as a franchise because they are, but they aren't really a franchise in essence.
I have a feeling as well that from memory, there was some issue with licensing and rights as well. I think there was a gap after the Voyage of the Dawn Treader film came out. And then they were going to make Horse and His... No, I'm missing a book. Silver Chair.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I remember the BBC TV version of that had Tom Baker in it. Do himself. That was going to be the next one made, and I think got into even casting and that sort of thing. But I think either Disney bought or Disney sold Walden Media, who were the ones making, and so it all just was dead in the water.
Yeah,
and then I think it was going to happen, it wasn't going to happen, and then I think it just got completely sidelined, and now I can't even remember who's making it. Probably Netflix, because they make everything.
Oh God.
There's a Magician's Nephew, I think, prequel one.
You're probably right. Possibly. It probably is Netflix. That's sad.
But yeah, I think it was something to do with Walden Media either being bought or being sold that kind of stopped the franchise.
Got it.
Because they're not cheap films.
No.
And I think box office had declined from, as you say, the best known story to the second best known story to the story that not as many people remember.
Okay, that makes sense to me. All right, so I might scandalize you by this score. I'm sorry. I give this a 5 out of 10 because I think it only half works. I don't think the.
I think that's completely fair. I'm a sort of around a 6.5, but there's at least 1.5 of that's just nostalgia and innate love for the material, not necessarily based on.
Yeah.
And also, I'm so far. If I didn't have that kind of nostalgic affection, I'm so far removed from the target audience for this film.
Yeah, right.
I can appreciate it, but I'm not who these stories are pitched at anymore, and haven't been for more years than I care to count.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not a bad movie, and there's a lot to like about it. And I actually think like the second half of the film into the third act is actually, I really like it. I really. Once we get into the Aslan of it all and the war and the fun stuff, I guess, I actually really like it. I think the second half is better than the first half. And so I give it a 5 out of 10. It's by default my worst of the week, but it's not a bad watch. Maybe a little bit overly long, but not a bad watch.
Yeah, my number 3. And the one thing which surprised me coming back to it after such a break is I do appreciate that they don't sugarcoat just how awful Tilda Swinton's White Queen.
Yeah.
She's not a cartoonish Maleficent. She's just flat out
evil.
Cold evil.
Yes. I've already talked about it too much, but I think that's another area where I don't, again, maybe I'm wrong because I haven't read these books, but I'm just going off of his nonfiction books that I've read, some of them, a handful of them, and just knowing his story and the loss of his wife and all this other sort of stuff, and reading some papers that he wrote, his ideas about storytelling. And so I have an odd relationship with C.S. Lewis. He's not special to me, but I've read a bunch of his philosophy of how to tell story, basically, and philosophy of life sort of stuff.
Very interesting.
He's a very interesting figure and thinker. I don't think that, these are little kid stories, at least certainly The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But I don't think he was dumbing concepts down to his audience.
No. Oh, no.
I think
that's one of the reasons they've endured, because they're not just fluff.
So if there's evil in the book, it's evil. It's not, like you said, it's not cartoon evil. And the movie allows her to be a very strong villain. She is a villain.
Well, if you're kind of positioning Aslan as this Jesus God archetype, by extension,
correct.
This is an archetype of the ultimate evil.
Yes, yeah, and yeah. Well, speaking of ultimate evil, it's time to talk about George Lucas again. It's time to talk about Revenge of the Sith, which is mercifully the last time I will ever have to talk about Star Wars on this show, probably ever. Praise Aslan. The Lion is on the move. Revenge of the Sith has a 79% somehow on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
Destroy the Sith. We must.
On May 19th, the Jedi fight. The ultimate battle. Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
Always on the move.
Rated PG-13.
Revenge of the Sith was written and directed by George Lucas on a legal pad over a long afternoon. It was a return of everybody. I don't give a fuck. It was released May 19th, 2005 on a budget of $113 million. It made $168.4 million. Some guys will do anything to get out of fatherhood.
Baby Vader and half of Hollywood do the worst acting of their careers while they duck and cover through more CGI than you can throw a stick at.
Okay, all right. I went on a rant about the Force of our Phantom Menace that caught some kind of fire last year, a little bit on the internet. People who I don't ever hear from, who apparently listen to the show, were like hitting me up about this rant, and I said I don't like. I feel like that's an old form of talking about movies on the internet. That's like a 2007, 2009 kind of be a nerd screaming about Star Wars on the internet. I don't want to be that guy. And then I did the exact same thing with Attack of the Clones.
Oh my God.
Because it's worse than Phantom Menace.
That movie is
horrendous.
Objectively a piece of shit.
It's one of the worst movies ever. It's just terrible.
Yeah. It's irredeemably bad.
And then there's this one, which is quote unquote the good one. So I'm going to do my best to not rant. I will say this, Dave. The first 24 minutes of this movie is the only part in any of these prequels, sequels, spinoffs that kind of feels like Star Wars. It is certainly the most Star Wars the prequels feel. But because all of the bad decisions are still there, it doesn't work completely. And Count Dooku is still a mess of a character. Where the fuck does he come from? What even is his plan? How did he get connected? Who was he connected with? None of it makes any sense. I'm not going to watch the Clone Wars. I'm not going to watch some cartoon that came out 5 years later to make sense of this gibberish.
Yeah, you can't retcon sense into bad writing.
That's it. That's not
how it works.
But that's what Star Wars has been trying to do. For 40 years is how can we make sense out of bad writing? And I'm not interested in the Filoni cottage industry of making sense out of bad storytelling.
Get fucked.
Grievous is a half-baked villain. Where the fuck does this guy come from?
Just the most ridiculous. I must admit, I have spent the years since I first saw this film hating that character more than all the other things that I hate about this film. Because the idea of droids with personality kind of irks me anyway. It's the most. I can get on board with R2 and 3PO because it's personality without agenda, I guess.
Yes, right.
Grievous, he coughs.
Well, I guess the idea is he's like a proto-Vader. There's some sort of organic in there, right?
Yeah, then you cut him open, there's like a beating heart inside this metal. Oh, fuck off. He's the most ridiculous... But...
It's very much a child's idea of something that's cool, right? What if it's a robot, but it's also maybe a Sith Lord, but it's not a Sith Lord?
Because then we could have him cough and have an accent.
But he seems weak. But then he throws the cloak off and he's got all these arms, and all of his arms are lightsabers, and they spin around. And it's very child action figure play storytelling.
Yeah. Oh, yep.
I love R2D2. The older I get, the more I love R2D2. I don't know why.
That's a masterpiece of character design to have that much personality.
It's magic.
In a featureless garbage can that only makes beeping sounds. That is very, very, very clever character creation.
Yes, and he is it's odd because like everybody on the planet can kind of you understand what the beeps mean even if you don't literally understand what the beeps mean.
There's so much personality.
So much personality, that little guy, and I love him. And I'm the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, Why would you put R2D2? Now, this is the benefit of complete and total hindsight. Why would you have R2D2 and C3PO in prequels where they shouldn't be, but do fuck all with them in the sequels where they should be? This doesn't make any sense. And that, like, Star Wars is broken because the prequels have all of these illusions and rehashes and
3PO who knows that Luke and Leia are siblings.
Bingo.
Knows that Darth Vader is his father. And not just half the cast of Episode 4 apparently
all know each other.
And they know each other.
So all of these relationships
Obi-Wan's
are in
like,
this
hello, my young friend. Who are you?
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck? You spent most of your life with this robot.
Oh, yes. I don't remember owning any droid. You had adventures together. What are you talking about? I understand. Yeah, R2's memory banks might have been wiped. Yours weren't, motherfucker. You're winding me up. Don't get me ranting. But here's my point.
Too long in the desert breathing in the spice melange and you've forgotten shit.
All of that makes sense if those relationships were in the goddamn sequels. If you took the worst instincts of the prequels, took them out, polished them off, and put them in the sequels, you would have better prequels and better sequels.
Yeah.
Yoda and Chewbacca are friends? What? But Chewbacca barely gets 2 words with Luke Skywalker? What? He doesn't hug Leia? She hugs this girl we don't know who's nobody? What?
Yeah. It's
everybody knows C3PO and R2D2? But nobody knows them and they do fuck all in the sequels?
Yeah.
Darth Vader built C3PO, but C3PO doesn't do a goddamn thing in these sequels until the very end, and then even what he does is moot. I mean, it just is mind-bending.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest problem.
How it got through the room full of writers. I mean, I know it's mainly George. 90% of my criticisms for all these films is all leveled at Lucas and what a terrible writer he is. But there's rooms full of people involved in getting final versions of scripts and getting
for at least
getting it on the
6
screen.
of these movies now.
And it's not like they were making prequels to obscure little indies that half of them may not have seen.
Right.
The world has seen these things 30 times over.
Right.
How no one went, wait a minute. We almost forgot that they all fucking don't know each other in the next film.
Yeah. It's
mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. We spend more time with Yoda's relationship with the Wookiees than we do with Anakin and Obi-Wan having adventures. And that was my other thing was I'm watching this, I'm going, this is my critique of the other 2 movies, and this is where it really comes to bear. In that first 24 minutes, we actually see them have a thrilling, not the death stick bullshit car chase, Blade Runner nonsense from Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
They're actually having an adventure. Anakin seems like an actual adult, capable person. I'm like,
and there's nice. I mean, I don't think they're well written, but there are nice little
banter
exchanges between them about. I owe you my life. That makes 10. No, it's 9. I'm not counting the time on whatever. You know, it's clunky writing, but it's a nice. It shows these guys have been together for a decade.
Yes, that's where the story should have started. Or at least by the time we get to part 2, the relationship they have in this movie should have been what part 2 was, and there's a turn in the 3rd act of part 2 that then leads to the ultimate fall in part 3.
Oh, I mean, yes, you get Hayden Christensen's kind of wooden rendition of I'm having second thoughts and I'm a bit vain and my ego.
But that needed to be a conflict way earlier in the trilogy.
Slow build, not
yes.
I'm a bit precocious to flick a switch and I'm murdering children and my eyes are glowing red.
Right.
There was no build up to that. It literally in the space of 5 minutes, he went from having second thoughts and not really knowing where he's, do I like the senator or do I like the Jedi, to literally being a cartoon moustache twirling bad guy.
But who slaughters children.
Yeah. With barely a moment's hesitation.
Yes. And I think okay, this is where I was getting at when I was screaming about the Phantom Menace. The entire flow and structure of this trilogy's narrative is wrong. And so because once you start off on the wrong foot, you can't course correct, because this is a rise and fall story. Before Lucasfilm Ltd shows up on the screen of Phantom Menace, we already know that Darth Vader is going to be created by the end of the story. We know that this is a tragedy. If you fuck up the rise, the fall doesn't count. It doesn't matter. And the only reason the fall that we 100%. See matters at all is because it's already loaded with this pre-established meaning from the original trilogy. They've done nothing in these three films to make the original trilogy deeper or more rich. Absolutely no part of the original trilogy is enriched by these prequels.
No. And in fact,
it seems almost as if the opposite has happened, to where it's degraded the original trilogy.
To a point, yeah, because one of the most emotional beats of the original trilogy is Vader's redemption, his mask coming off.
Yes.
And
how weak and feeble and regretful he is.
Yeah. And it's harder to buy that now because the act of slaughtering children is irredeemably bad.
Yes.
That's an unforgivable moment that all the arc in the world can't remedy. He wasn't hypnotized. He wasn't being controlled. He did it off his own volition, and that's irretrievably bad.
But here's the thing. I think if you had told a better story from the get-go with the Phantom Menace, which probably needed a new name, but if you had told a better story starting with an older Anakin and a firmer sense of continuity between the things that Obi-Wan actually said and then your prequels, and I think you could tell a compelling story. Maybe you couldn't get to the point of him lightsabering a bunch of kids, but you could get to the point where even though you don't agree, you have to feel sorry for Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
You have to go, oh my God, this good but wounded person fell into something that any of us so easily could have fallen into, and was so misguided and taken advantage of and betrayed, and his mind was so twisted by the dark. And that is, in essence, I think, what George is trying to get at.
It's so bad,
but it's so badly
Ian
done.
McDiarmid's performance as Palpatine is so cartoonishly bad. Even when he's being the senator, he's so obviously evil.
Well, he's been obviously evil the entire time. Yes,
and we as the audience know he is, but he's not charming and charismatic enough as a politician to believe that anyone's falling under his spell, particularly when the things he's saying are so obviously villainous.
Well, we also have to, I've ranted about this before, we also have to get to the point of, why does he look like he's a 10,000-year-old wizard, evil wizard? And the answer in the original trilogy is because he was most likely a 10,000-year-old evil wizard, kept only alive by
you assume that
the dark side.
Yoda's 900 and something. He should be a comparable age because he is the opposing.
Yes.
He can't just be an old dude.
He can't be a 50-year-old guy who
has Yoda lived through like 10 generations of Sith?
Right.
Which, I mean, some of the fundamental things that. But
no, see, he
why
looks
are there
like
only
that,
two?
though.
How are the Sith a problem when there's only ever two of them? There's like thousands of freaking Jedi.
Right, exactly.
Why are the Sith even a problem?
These movies, I think, honestly, I think they undid Star Wars. The more you expand this world, the more you realize there's nothing here.
I don't like any of the prequels. I think Phantom Menace is the best of the prequels, and it's not good by any stretch.
I would say yes.
It makes me the least angry. the worst things about that are annoying children and racist archetypes of aliens.
Well, the worst thing about that is it starts the entire story off the wrong foot.
Well, and it starts off a trilogy that we didn't
Well,
want.
yeah, Anakin doesn't need to be a fucking Muppet. He doesn't need to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. It doesn't make any sense. When I met your father, he was already one of the best star pilots in the galaxy and a cunning warrior. There is no 8-year-old who is one of the best star pilots in the fucking galaxy. But if you got an 18-year-old to play that character, and he's a hotshot pilot, and he's charming, and he's handsome, and he's a good guy, and we like him, and we see where he comes from, and he's got some trauma in his past, and we can relate to him. And then all the second movie, by the end of the first movie, he decides to become a Jedi, and he saves the day in some way, and him and Obi-Wan become the best of friends, and that obscures Obi-Wan's ability to see what's happening to him because he loves him too much. He loves him too much to see that there's something not quite right, because that's what fucking Obi-Wan said. I thought that I could train him the way that Yoda trained me. I was too young to be training him, and I missed stuff. And Yoda tried
no mention of any Qui-Gon Jinn in those
fucking
original
Qui-Gon Jinn, no fucking midi-chlorians, no virgin birth, nothing. If the implication you get is that Yoda,
your mother dying of a broken heart.
Yoda fucking told Obi-Wan, don't train that kid. You're not ready.
Yeah.
And he went ahead anyways. And Obi-Wan carries that guilt inside of him that my pride led to his fall. And none of that is in these movies. And then Leia has memories of her mom from when she was very, very young. From what? The birthing table? I just remember her being sad. The image you get is like she remembers being a little girl, maybe on her mom's lap, and her mom's looking out the window and is sad. And also, of all the places to put Luke Skywalker, you put him on his father's fucking planet with his father's stepbrother?
Where are we going to hide them in a galaxy? We're going to leave one of them with Mum's best mate.
Yep.
And the other one we'll put with his uncle.
Yep. But see, all of that can be avoided if Anakin is a grown man, not from Tatooine. If he's just from another planet, then it makes sense, because Tatooine is a shithole on the outer rim. It's in the far-flung part of the galaxy.
Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru do not need to be literal uncle and aunt. That can just be what you call your foster parents.
You could have established a different kind of connection there, through Beru and because it was obvious that Uncle Owen knew his father. He's got too much of his father in him. That's what I'm afraid of. Now, they retcon that to make it seem like he knows his father's Darth Vader. All he was saying is, I'm afraid this kid's going to go off into war and fucking die, right? Yeah. Because that's what happened to his dad, right? Before Empire, right? Is Anakin left, became a Jedi or whatever. So he obviously knew him. So, okay, I find somebody that had a connection to Anakin. He had no known family, but this was somebody he was connected to. And he now lives in this far distant planet and and no one will ever think to look there. And I'll stay there to protect the kid just in case, because it's kind of a, nasty planet.
It's just,
but all of that, so much of this gets fixed.
How does he not?
Act 3, no matter how much better it is than Act 1 or Act 2, is still fucked if Act 1 and Act 2 are shit.
Yeah.
So yes, there are good moments in this movie. Yes, there's better special effects.
Not many.
The
CGI is just ropey as crap.
Have you seen Attack of the Clones in the last 3 months?
Well,
I have.
That movie is that is the worst of the 9.
So I'm coming off of Attack of the Clones, and I'm going, Jesus Christ!
This film is not as bad as Rise of Skywalker, so it's not the second worst.
I think I like Rise of Skywalker better than this, and here's my controversial take.
Ooh.
Because I don't accept it as a Star Wars movie. By that point, to me, Star Wars is dead. And so when I watch Rise of Skywalker, I usually watch it, and I have watched it multiple times, in about 25-minute chunks, and I view it more of almost like a adaptation of the Galaxy Rangers cartoon from the 80s, or Brave Star. If you watch, I'm being dead serious. If you watch it as if it's adaptation of some Korean cartoon from the 80s in 20-minute chunks, and you're like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. It's a Saturday morning cartoon.
In all seriousness, if you change all the names and take the word Star Wars off Rise of Skywalker, 90% of my problems disappear.
Yes, that's what I mentally do. I'm like, this is a pretty fun movie.
Like, the acting's all fine.
Yeah.
It's got decent special effects, but the writing is so abysmally bad.
Yes.
And the continuity is so terrible that, I hate it. But
but here's the thing. I can't do that with this. This movie is it's Star Wars. I cannot Saturday morning cartoon it. It is just Star Wars, and it's a bad Star Wars. And this is the end of a bad trilogy that absolutely ruined this franchise for all of eternity.
What I was getting at with the special effects is now having watched 4 other films from the same year in close proximity.
That's a good point. Yeah.
The CG in this film, given the budget, is unforgivably terrible.
That's a good point.
It's really, really bad throughout. And that's on top, obviously, the writing and everything else. So many moments. The battle over the lava at the end that so many of this film's apologists defend as being this great duel is just and just the writing of it. Anakin has accepted the fact that his young, surrogate brother has gone over to the dark side to the point of no return, or he wouldn't be having the battle with him. Cuts his legs off,
Anakin,
but still loves him. Like, he's tearfully, in what should have been a wonderful moment, tearfully going, "You were my brother. You were supposed to, save the Force, not to go to the dark side." So he obviously still has affection for him and sorrow for, you were my brother. Anakin has had his legs chopped off, is lying half submerged in lava, on fire, screaming in pain.
I hate you.
And Obi-Wan turns around and walks away.
Okay.
Now, either he thinks that this guy has the potential to destroy the universe, in which case, finish him off. Don't be the Bond villain and tell him your plan and then turn your back and, maybe he'll get saved, as he does. Or, which is more likely, you still love this guy and this is breaking your heart. He is on fire and screaming. You would put him out of his misery. You wouldn't just leave him to slowly burn to death. It's the most convenient, contrived piece of writing.
It is.
In a movie that is replete with convenient, contrived writing.
Well, and there's nothing about this. There's nothing about their fight. All that needs to happen is that Darth Vader needs to get fucked up. Anakin needs to get fucked up by the end of the story.
You don't need this prolonged, badly choreographed, shitty sword fight.
Somewhere, some far-flung place, George Lucas said at some point, years previous, that he fell into lava or whatever. So I guess it has to be lava. But it could have been done in such a way that Obi-Wan genuinely believes that he's dead. That he falls off somewhere, he loses track of him in the smoke.
It's just badly
rendered. And he thinks that he's dead, and then we know that he's not, and then Obi-Wan has to go do something, and it's just heartbroken, and he just this guy gotta get the fuck out of here. He's obviously dead. I look for him, I can't find him. He's dead.
It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground when you're standing half a foot taller with guys who have the Force and can leap 30 feet in the air.
Right.
What the fuck?
and then pan down the river of lava, and he comes crawling out like the fucking Terminator. And now he has the red eyes. Like, it just could have been staged so much more dramatically and so much better. Like, we know it's coming. We know that what the feeling you should get is that the worst.
Why are his eyes even red?
Well,
Dooku's eyes aren't red. You don't turn red-eyed just because you're evil in this universe.
But you do now, see, because Darth Maul was cool and he had those eyes.
But he had red eyes because he was this cool, badass-looking alien with horns and spikes and red and black skin.
We killed him too early, and we didn't realize that everybody liked that look. So now it's the same way of why do all Jedis dress like they're moisture hermits on Tatooine? Well, because Obi-Wan.
Yeah. Why do they all have blue and green lightsabers except if your ego's big enough and you demand a purple one because you're special? Fuck off.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Vanity needs to be banned in movies because you end up with shit like purple lightsabers that make no sense whatsoever just because one dude wants to be a bit fly.
If you're going to have Yoda confront Palpatine.
Oh my God, that duel was fucking terrible.
Now, wait, if you're going to have him do it, shouldn't he be the one to, and if you're going to be dumb enough to be like, well, Palpatine looks like a monster because he got fucked up in a lightsaber duel now. Shouldn't Yoda have been the one to fuck him up? Why is Mace Windu the one that fucks him up?
Yeah, because Samuel L. Jackson's got an ego like The Rock, and he demanded.
But you know, but I'm being, yeah, you're right. But it should.
That is the reason.
If Yoda's going to fight at all, he ought to kick that guy's fucking ass.
Yeah. Why? I mean, Mace Windu as a character has always bothered me because he only exists. He's only as prominent as he is because Sam Jackson wanted.
He serves no purpose.
I'll be in your movie, but I need. But there's never any indication that he is older than an average lifespan dude.
No,
who's presumably powerful with the Force. Why is Yoda just on level pegging with all of these other guys when he's 800 years old?
Makes no sense.
He should be on a fucking pedestal like a demigod in that Jedi Hall.
Or because
if you're a 900-year-old master,
yeah, but if you're going from the Buddhist angle, he'd really be like in the lowest position, right? Where, but he doesn't care about power. He'd be like Aslan. I don't really care about the throne.
No, but they don't defer to him.
Yeah, that's correct. Right.
Mace Windu doesn't defer to him. They just sit in a circle and have chats, and Yoda quietly and sagely sits there.
That's because, but that's because from the very beginning they didn't get any of the Star Wars right in Star Wars when they made Phantom Menace.
But considering the fact that when Mace Windu was a 5-year-old kid, a youngling, Yoda was still the oldest.
Years old.
Yoda was still Master Yoda.
Yeah, you're
when
right.
his grandfather was a youngling, Yoda was still Master Yoda.
You're right.
Surely you defer to him on all decisions.
But David, they got the Jedi wrong. Why do they have to be celibate? Why do they all dress like Luke Skywalker? None of it's right. None of it's right.
No.
None of it. And none of it was right. The moment he put that pen in that legal pad and started drafting this out, it was wrong then.
Episode 4, Obi-Wan is dressed like that because he's on a desert planet.
Yes, he's a hermit.
Not because it's a fucking uniform.
It's not a Jedi. Yeah, I'm going to go into hiding so nobody knows I was a Jedi in the Jedi
and I'm going to wear Jedi robes.
Yeah.
I'm going to live within walking distance of Darth Vader's birthplace.
In a Jedi uniform, yes.
And I'm going to wear my uniform.
And I'm
going to keep my surname.
A heavily imperially occupied planet, yes.
And I will change my name from Obi-Wan Kenobi to Ben Kenobi.
That's right, yeah.
Oh, fuck this movie. I can't talk about it anymore. It's fucking terrible.
It just doesn't work. My hot take is that neither the prequels, sequels, or any subsequent material, and yes, it includes Clone Wars, has done anything but make Star Wars worse and worse and worse. It all needs to be shit canned. None of it's canon anymore. And all we have is the original trilogy and maybe a couple of video games, and the rest should be ignored. That's my hottest take. Just strike it. It doesn't exist anymore. Get rid of it like you did the Galactic Star Cruise and fucking Orlando. Oh, it's just millions wasted for no good reason. 6.5 out of 10. It's my number 3 for the week.
See, weirdly, I'm way more down on this film. I'm a 3.5 out of 10 on this one. Absolutely my number 5. Fucking bullet. But I like Last Jedi, with the exception of the casino bit, which is unnecessary. But as a film, I genuinely like it. I like it most out of everything apart from the original trilogy. I don't dislike Force Awakens.
Please don't stop. Please don't get me started on that.
That movie, and Rogue One, I liked. I liked so much.
Ryan Schwartz, wherever the Ryan, what's his name?
Oh, don't be going on poor old Ryan.
Now, Schwartz here had an opportunity that J.J. Abrams up to get the entire original cast in one scene with each other, and he didn't do it because he thought he was too clever for Star Wars. You go make another Mansur Mala detective film or whatever the that's called. Off Ryan Schwartz. What's his name? Ryan Johnson. Suck my Ryan. Peace. You make Looper 2. Fuckface.
Yeah. I'd be on board for that.
All right. See, he got me pissed now. Yeah, I love Luke Skywalker being a complete failure. Okay, all right. David Powell, friend of the show, no friend of mine. Now it's time to move on to the very first time that Robert Pattinson fucked around with mermaids. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire has 88% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Hogwarts has been chosen to host a legendary event.
One epic challenge.
The Tri-Wizard Tournament.
2 new schools. 3 dangerous tasks.
I'm scared for you.
Year 4 is here. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, rated PG-13, starts November 18th.
Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire was directed by Mike Newell. I don't know who he is. It was written by Stephen Kloves. I don't know who he is. It's a triumph return of everybody. This film was released November 15th, 2005, on a budget of $150 million. It made $896.6 million at the worldwide box office. Teen wizards compete in an international magical sporting event that turns deadly. I got questions, but go ahead.
The most dangerous school in history becomes even more dangerous as students are encouraged to enter a deadly tournament that turns out to actually be a deadly tournament.
Yes.
And there's dragons and mermaids.
Yes. Okay. I have already covered this movie. We did the whole Harry Potter series. Go back if you want my detailed thoughts, because I don't have very many for this watch. But I am, on the one hand, I am proud that authors were writing books for kids that matured with as the audience matured, and that had stakes. People actually fucking die, and even in a world of magic, they stay dead for the most part. I applaud that. I applaud that they didn't shy away from it in the movies. I think this movie does a really interesting thing that I noticed the first time I watched it, and still true, which is it starts off kind of goofy and weird. It's very weird. And it gets progressively more serious and dark. And it's a very good transition movie to the first set of films, which are a little bit more whimsical, to where this series of films is going to end up with a more mature, dark tone as Voldemort's evil manifests more and more into the world of Hogsmeade and Hogwarts and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I think it's a very capable bridge movie. But goddamn, they be killing a lot of kids. Like, who would sign up for this? Who would come from Russia with a busload of kids to watch a handful of kids from their class possibly die trying to chase a fucking thing because somebody put your name in a goblet of fire? Who would do this? Who would volunteer? This is like volunteering for the Hunger Games. Why would you do it?
This school is not a place to send kids if you're remotely fond.
This is Wizard Battle Royale. Why? What the fuck are we doing? And the thing that's always been so strange to me is I like the character of Dumbledore, but he's got a little Aslan in him because
he's very big picture.
Yes,
he'll let a lot of shit slide if the end goal is
the long view.
I think every year he says something along the lines of, "I do apologize, Harry. I've put you in terrible danger this year." It's like, dude, that should just be on the letter I get when I go to school in the first place. You will be in mortal danger for 6 years.
Okay, and this is my age, Mr. Powell. This is my age. I'm now thinking of trauma. I am now at the age where there's stuff that, it was bad. I went through it. I dealt with it. I'm good. And on some idle fucking Thursday at 10 p.m. when I should be asleep, I'm just like, oh, like Harry reaching for his scar. I'm like, oh, that thing in 5th grade. Whoa, God. I'm just angry all of a sudden. I don't know why. Oh, that's trauma in my body trying to escape. These kids are fucked. If you went to Hogwarts at any point in history, you're fucked. You are fucked. You're fucked. You're fucked. You're fucked. The teachers who are supposed to be looking out for you are shape-shifting and trying to kill you.
only if you went in the 6-7 year window when this little asshole Harry was there.
No, because
decades
because
prior
Tom
to that,
Riddle was a student there too. So if you were,
oh yeah, but that was decades. You had decades post Voldemort being gotten
no
rid of.
named. Yes,
before Tom Riddle was around. When the school was probably a wonderful magical place.
Yeah, but then all of a sudden,
about pixies and
it might have been a wonderful magical place, but you had fucking
happened to come up Snake Eyes in the poll, and you happened to be there at the same time as he who survived, and suddenly you're in the line of fire for the greatest evil the world's ever known.
Suddenly you're moaning Myrtle. You're a ghost in the boys' room trying to look at Harry Potter's dick. Moaning Myrtle. And the thing is, like, you got fucking the first movie, you got John Cleese, was decapitated on the campus. He's in the fucking lunchroom with his head in his hand going, whoa. I mean, I think they've just been killing people and kids at this school since it was founded.
It's the flip side. You want to live in a world where cool magic exists, you got to put up with some horrific shit.
It's the anti-Narnia.
It is.
That's why, it is the perfect example of why you got to go with, are you going to go with Jesus or are you going to go with the occult here? Because in Jesus land, Jesus dies for the little children. In occult land, the little children die for Dumbledore. They die for sport in the occult.
Yeah, they're school sport. I hated sports mostly when I was in high school, but at least I knew the worst that was going to happen is you might get a stitch or maybe scrape your knee or something.
You wouldn't fall from 10,000 feet off of a broom.
I mean, sure, they can magically repair you, but yeah, people break bones and all sorts of things in Quidditch, and that's just the regular sport. God forbid when they have these every few year tournaments when they just wheel out a truckload of dragons and man-eating mermaids.
Yeah. Hey, kids, ever seen a movie called Bloodsport?
There was a level of responsibility when they said, and this year we're making a change. No one under the age of 17 can go up against the fire-breathing dragon.
No one under the age of 17 can compete in the Kumite. With magic powers. It's, you know what it is? It's Mortal Kombat. These kids are in Mortal Kombat. Hey, sorry to tell you, Harry, if you lose the fucking Wizard International, whatever they call it, Shao Kahn's going to rip a hole through the universe and take over the 9 realms.
Spine out of you.
Yeah. Hermione had her spine ripped out of her back during a fatality in the last round, so she won't be coming back. Sorry. Robert Pattinson blows fucking Daniel Radcliffe out of the fucking water in this movie. Daniel Radcliffe has come out and said that at least for a couple of these movies, he was drunk and coked up and stuff when he was making them. I think this has to be one of them because he's terrible in this movie. Everybody is so much better than him. His reactions to everything are so bad. He is so terrible in this movie.
And you can lump Twilight in with these comments as well with Kristen Stewart and Pattinson in those, not Taylor Lautner, who's always been terrible, but these films around this time that had young actors, most of them have gone on to be genuine. And I don't know if it was just they were just acting nonstop in these franchises for a decade and they got good just through practice. But that's probably an element of it. But they're all Rupert Grint, Emma Radcliffe, Pattinson, Kristen. They're all really, really talented, really think very highly of all of them. But you're right. Back then, mostly, and I think Emma Watson was always pretty good, I think. But the others, they were all because none of them, they hadn't acted before, certainly in this film, in the first few, and so they are pretty bad. I think they're carried by the fact that you've got the who's who of British Shakespearean actors around them, and they just hold the entire projects aloft because the cast list is so ridiculously stacked.
But I thought Radcliffe was better as younger Harry, and maybe he was. I think.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I think
I found him rather annoying for the first. Certainly the first two. The Chris Columbus ones, I think, are the weakest of the entire franchise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah,
and it's to be expected. They obviously mature in tone, so I'm going to like them more the further you go. The first ones are very
And
aimed
Alfonso
at the age of the
Cuarón
kids that they are.
is a much better filmmaker than this guy.
Oh, yeah, and that's kind of what
Columbus.
I was leading to is that Columbus, I think, was the right guy for those first two.
Yeah.
But I think putting Cuarón in for the third was a stroke of genius because you had this massive shift in tone.
Yep.
And then Mike Newell, who, really, really good British director. You would have seen Donnie Brasco, Four Weddings and a Funeral.
Oh, yeah, that's what this is.
Love in the Time of Cholera. He did a great movie with Billy Bob and Cusack called Pushing Tin.
Oh, yeah, I know Pushing
about
Tin.
air traffic. Like he's done a lot of stuff. He's very good
Odd
director.
choice for this, though.
Yeah, I think they did Cuarón and they went, all right, we need to back it off a little. We still want a really good director.
Yeah.
But that shit was just a bit too dark.
Yeah.
So we'll back it off just a little bit. We'll get a guy who directs grown-up movies, not the Home Alone guy.
Yeah.
And then obviously you get David Yates coming in after this, and he's basically been the guy for the franchise and spin-offs ever since. But I think Prisoner of Azkaban and this one, Goblet of Fire, are two of my favorites because I like the fact that they're not Chris Columbus, they're not David Yates. They each have their own tone and they kind of stand apart from the rest of the franchises as their own beast, which I kind of like. And I just genuinely like the story of this. I mean, this crazy ass tournament where you've got these.
So you like
kids
this
compete.
part?
I do. I like this. Film
I find this movie to be a lot of treachery until we get to Voldemort.
It's definitely like, and it's the longest of the books by a considerable margin, I think. From memory, if I sort of picture all these books on my shelf, there's this giant fat red spine tome in the middle.
That might be it too, right? As someone who's not familiar with the
because there's a lot happening in this story.
There is a lot, and even in the movie, there's a lot happening. And you're like, wait, who's who again? And this guy knows this guy, and that happened 40 years ago, and this person's part of the Death Eaters, and that person's on the council, but that's their son, and that person does this.
And I think that that's part of it, because I think for the length of the film, that a lot's been cut out.
Wow.
To stop it being too. So from memory with the book, you've got a lot more time spent before the Triwizard Cup is even a thing. So you've got the World Cup of Quidditch.
Yeah.
That's dealt with very quickly the point where rewatching it, I'm going, have they even said where I don't even think they said where they're going.
No.
They just suddenly all touch this portkey magical boot and they're there. And it's like, what? This was like 50 pages of the book. We know where they're going. They talk about the fandom of the fact that some of the Weasleys most of them go for Irish, but Ron's in love with Victor Crumb, so he's going for the fucking Germans or whatever, Russians, whatever they are. There's a lot more there, and it's. I mean, I'm assuming it's been cut out because it's already a really long fucking movie, particularly for something that you're going to have kids going to. Yeah.
No, this is very long, and it has its moments, but I think, man, Robert Pattinson, as I'm watching, I'm just like, it's the difference between a star and an actor. And I don't say that to diminish Pattinson's ability as an actor, but it's like he shows up in this movie and you're like, oh, you're the guy. That's Daniel Radcliffe. That's an actor, and he's nice, but you're the guy.
I think that's why, and his character is, I think, reduced in this as well compared to because you don't really care all that much at his demise or his dad Amos Diggory's sorrow. Like that's over in seconds.
Well, okay. Hang on. That his dad. I don't know if you're in touch at all, but that has become an incredible meme on TikTok. And
oh, really?
That's my son! That's my boy! My boy!
Is it my boy? Oh, my son! And it's always applied to the most ridiculous stuff. And I have used it multiple times of like when your friend gets pegged when your friend goes on a date with the muscle mommy from the gym and you found out he ended up getting pegged. And you're, oh, my boy, my boy. And it's always used in that context of something's happened to your mate where he's been, railed by at least in my algorithm, he's been railed by a muscle mommy.
I have new appreciation for that scene.
And when it came on, I forgot it was in this movie. I fucking died. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
What else have we got? We've got Doctor Who in here, pre-Doctor Who.
Yep.
Which was kind of cool. I hadn't forgotten about it, but when I started watching it, I sort of went, "Oh, that's right. Oh, cool. We got a little baby Tennant in here." The one of the things that I've always liked about this particular entry in the series is it's where you start to the kids are starting to get to an age where they're hitting puberty, and the inevitable awkwardness of having a two guys and a girl trio of friends starts to come up. And I think both in the writing and in the film, I think it's handled very well.
Yeah.
You've got the obvious resentment that Ron was always going to start to feel, that his best mate's always the rock star and he's always in the shadow and he's the ginger and he's, and I think that is handled very, very well. And the sort of brewing unacknowledged attraction between he and Hermione is done very, very well. And the fact that, as they do, she is far more mature about these things than he is.
Yes.
And gets very frustrated with him about it. I love all of those little interactions. I think the awkwardness of the boys when they have to go to a dance and have to ask girls to accompany them. So much relatable stuff in there. And then Ron's older brothers who just kind of look down the table and go, yep, cool. Yeah, so much to enjoy. I enjoyed this even more than I remembered enjoying it.
I remembered it. I enjoyed it less, even more than I remembered enjoying it less. So again, we've inverted. I remember this being the one when I watched the entire series, I was sort of kind of mad about until that guy brings out a fucking baby Voldemort, which is just so weird, man. He is Voldemort giving orders and drop him in the stew and he comes out. Yeah, and I really love that moment. I loved it the first time. I really love it here too, when he's like, Ray Fiennes is just going bonkers in that scene, and he's sort of
he's in the graveyard. He's having so much, and
I would say he's chewing up the scenery. He is, but he isn't. It's very strange.
Oh, it's quite restrained.
He's lilting around.
He's
like,
very, very nuanced.
I can touch you now. And it's just like, wow, it is the imposition of real, this sounds so strange given the fact that we just had a tri-wizard tournament or whatever it's called, where we've been killing kids all semester long, but it's the imbuement of real stakes, that the evil that's been in the back of the teacher's head, the evil that was time locked in a Horcrux, the evil that was at the periphery and sort of its tendrils were coming towards you. It's not the tendrils anymore. The beast,
it's made solid, brought forth
right in front of you.
And one of the things that I think, all of these stories, both books and movies, don't shy away from obviously kids being in danger or even kids being killed. It's not a happy Disney thing where everyone comes out the other end. The stakes are obviously real, but the offhand way that he kills Cedric,
he doesn't
even look at him. It's just Avada Kedavra, and he's dead.
Yes,
and we don't even dwell on his body. Like Harry's sort of like, oh no, get away from me,
my boy, my boy. Oh my boy. Yep.
But the story just progresses. It's like, oh my god, it's not even a big deal within the framework of this scene, let alone the film.
Yeah.
Affecting stuff.
Yeah, very much so. I give it a 6.75. I'm going to reconfigure some stuff here. I do think it's better than Revenge of the Sith, so that I'm going to bump this one up to 6.75. Bump Sith to number 4. Put this one at number 3. That's where I put it. What about you?
My number 2, Damn.
Damn.
I'm going to be a 7.
Okay, so we're pretty close on the score. Yep. All right, well, it's time for a recap. Let's make sure I get this right. Coming in dead last for me is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which I give a 5 out of 10.
Harsh.
I'm so sorry.
So harsh.
Number 4 is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, which I give a 6.5 out of 10. Basically just for that first 24 minutes. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire comes in as my number 3 with a 6.75 out of 10. Surprising me most of all, maybe, is my number 2, which is King Kong, which I give a 7 out of 10. And a movie I hated in 2005 when I saw it on a date with my girlfriend, her dad, and his prostitute at the drive-in. War of the Worlds, which I give an 8 out of 10.
Oh, wow.
It's a true story.
Wow, okay. Alrighty. Starting at number 5 with Sith, which is just atrocious in every way. That's a 2 out of 10. My number 4 was War of the Worlds, which had some very good things and some very, very bad things. And I am a 4 out of 10 on that. Then we're in Narnia. Very much nostalgia playing in here, but I'm a 6.5 on that. Harry Potter at number 2 with a 7. And King Kong, my number 1, fairly comfortably at 8 out of 10.
Wow, you surprised me. Super patron.
Wildly different lists.
Supporter of the show, David Powell. Mr. Powell, you have entered the very last film onto the guest list. We got Last Movie Stay in Spring Blast coming on, but before we get there, tell me where can the fine folks find you at home when you're not here binging movies with me and reconsidering your support of this show. I mean, trashing what's left of your childhood innocence.
This is so much easier to do now. Pottymouthradio.com. Everything's there. We've got movie shows. We've got a music show. We've got my co-host Billy doing Friends rewatches with his wife. We've got a Dungeons and Dragons show we'll be kicking off soon. We've got all sorts of stuff. But
I've not been invited to be a part of Potty Mouth.
The invitation exists on the website. There's a big thing there that says, do you have a show? Want to be part of our network?
I've been doing this for too long to have to request that I be part of your network. If you wanted me, you'd ask me. That's it. See, here's the thing, DP. Anybody ever call you that? Is you chase a check, you never chase a bitch. You understand what I'm saying?
To be fair, the network just launched and we don't have anyone on it yet.
If you're wanted, they come for you. If you have to chase them, they don't really want you and they will not stay with you. They won't be loyal.
Oh, you will definitely be approached to appear on shows, my friend.
Okay, all right.
That is already in the works.
Okay, all right.
We just haven't worked out what yet because we're still in the process of trying to get the thing up and running.
Get it up and running. Get your lawyers in touch with my folks over at Buena Vista Home Entertainment Corporation. We'll see if we can get it cleared. All I ask is first class airfare because it's a long way to get to Oz.
Oh yeah. We're not sending you cattle class. Don't be silly.
I'm too tall for that. At 6'4", I need to be in the sleeper chair. I need to lay flat chair for that 20-hour flight. Let's see. What else do I got for you? Oh, we've already been here for about 3 hours. Give me about 10 more minutes because I want to talk to you over on Patreon if you don't mind. Patreon.com/binge movies.
For sure, my friend.
All right. This has been David Powell from We Watch the Thing and the Countdown Super Chat, Super Spreader, whatever it's called. I'm Jason from Binge Movies. Until next time, when there'll be Last Movie Standing, Spring Blast! Binge on.